Did you know that the vast majority of players lose their games not because they lack skill, but because they keep making the same fatal mistake over and over again? Today, I'm going to show you what that mistake is, how to avoid it, and most importantly, how to turn it into an opportunity so you can win that game yourself. And the best part, do you know how I'm going to do it? Well, I'm not going to explain it to you with some example you don't know anything about. Instead, I'm going to use one of my own from a game I played recently in a tournament, so I'll be able to explain it to you firsthand. In that game, I was playing with the black pieces and used the French defense. The good thing about using my own example is that no one knows better than I do what I was thinking during that game, not even Magnus Carlsen. So I played the French defense, and my opponent went for the exchange variation. You already know that here they can push the pawn forward, play knight to c3 or even knight to d2, the Tarrasch variation. And another very well-known variation is to play pawn takes pawn. Careful, something very important you should know, especially for those of you playing below the 1600 or 1800 level, is that the opening is not the most important thing in the world, okay? It's great for starting the game, especially to avoid losing. If you can choose and get an advantage, even better. But the most important thing is what you think about after the opening is over, everything you'll consider during the game. Because from that point on, neither you nor your opponent will know what to do, and that's when you'll have to start thinking for yourselves. In this game, after knight to f3, I played knight to d6, bishop to d6. All of this is theoretical, okay? In the exchange French, the bishops are usually placed here, the knights here. In fact, my opponent does exactly the same as I do, or rather, I do exactly the same as my opponent, and here there are different strategies. I'll explain it to you. A very interesting move that you can A move that both white and black can use in this variation of the exchange French is pinning the knight with the bishop. Right now, it would be too early because there's the move queen to e7, which would force my opponent to move one of their pieces back. Either the bishop they just moved, the previous bishop, or failing that, move their queen. Then I could play queen takes queen, and after bishop takes queen, they've also moved their bishop back. Thanks. And in fact, it leaves this diagonal wide open for my other bishop. That's why my opponent, who, by the way, was pretty strong, what they did was, instead of bringing out the bishop, they castled first. Exactly the same thing I did. And now this plan is much stronger. Why? Because the king is no longer on the central file. It's that simple. Did you get it? All right, so here I thought, look, I'll castle, and if my opponent plays, if they play bishop to g5, I'll do the same, bishop to g4. And if they play something else, like rook to e1, what I'll do is play h6, an important prophylactic move so my opponent can't bring their bishop here. Then my opponent decides to go for this typical plan, and I say, well, I'll do it too, okay? My opponent's first mistake. This is a common mistake, especially at lower levels, exchanging pieces when you shouldn't. I trade my bishop for the knight. I guess my opponent had studied this line, because they didn't have a low ELO rating. So I thought, it's strange that they would capture this knight. Why? Because now, by capturing with my queen, look at what has happened. First, my opponent has lost the strong pin they had. They don't have it anymore. I still have mine, and not only that, I've actually made it even stronger. So I don't have any problems, and my opponent has a big one. The problem is this pin right here. My bishop is still aiming perfectly, and now I've also brought my queen into play. And not only that, but I also have the bishop pair. What does it mean to have the bishop pair? It means having both bishops. That's always a slight advantage over your opponent. And so the game continues from here. What am I threatening now? If my opponent decides to play, for example, c3 to improve their pawn structure, what am I going to do? Bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, queen takes f3, g takes f3. That way, my opponent's pawn structure would be completely ruined. That's why here, very wisely, my opponent plays knight from b to d2, thus reinforcing this knight on f3, which is the real piece under threat at this point. There were a lot of possible moves here. c6, knight b to 7, rook 8. There probably isn't one that's better than the others, but I chose this one, knight to c6. Normally, when we have doubled pawns on the queen side, you have to be careful because all these lessons I give you, in the course of a single lesson, you're sure to learn 10, 15, even 20 things. That's what's great about these videos, right? When there are doubled pawns on the queen's file, like you see here, the two pawns on the queen's column, the best way to fight against them is with the c-pawn. I That's why if I put this knight here in front, I'm actually hurting myself a bit because now this c-pawn can't advance. But why did I do it? Very good question. For now, I did it because I'm putting a lot of pressure on this pawn right here. In fact, now I'm threatening knight takes, winning a pawn, since this knight isn't defending the d4 pawn, because this knight is useless now as it's pinned. So my opponent has to play c3. Very good move. Rook to e8, you see? What I do is try to make the difficult things simple. Careful, chess games are anything but simple. They're extremely complicated, don't get me wrong. But the important thing is to try to make it as simple as possible to understand it well, and above all, so that things flow smoothly. Pay attention, what do? Well, I have all my pieces developed. What am I going to do? Well, I bring the rooks into the attack. In this case, I place the rook on the open file. An open file is a file where there are no pawns, neither ours nor the opponent's, and where the rooks feel right at home because they have plenty of space to move. It's obvious that this rook here isn't as happy as this rook on the e-file. And why do I bring this rook and not the other one? Because I want to place this rook here, and the other one I'll probably either put on its side or bring it over here and try to advance on this side. So I prefer to place this rook, since it wasn't doing much here on f. The opponent plays queen to c2, a move. It's actually a really good move, because first it gets out of the pin, so now it's helping its knight. Now when the knight moves, it can do so without losing the queen. And on top of that, it's threatening me with a battery. This bishop and queen battery is threatening this h7 square. How should I defend it? A mistake would be to play g6. Why? Because I'm weakening the dark squares around my king a lot. Do you see it? Since all the pawns are on white squares. The dark squares would be very weak, and on top of that, they could trap this bishop if I'm not very careful. So I played h6, a much better move. It's true that they can give me this check, but it doesn't do anything. I would simply keep my king here, and now I'd be threatening this move, winning my opponent's bishop. That's why here, a simple check, just for the sake of it, doesn't make any sense. Don't give checks just to give them, okay? So my opponent makes a good move, bringing his rook to the open file as well. All right, so this is a moment to think, right? It's a moment where we really need to start thinking now. We have all our pieces developed, the rook on the file, there's the possibility of a rook exchange. What should I do? Should I exchange just for the sake of exchanging, or should I look for a better move? Well, look, this knight here, it's not really doing anything anymore, right? It's threatening a pawn that's well defended, it can't jump here, and it's not doing anything over here. So I reposition it to the e7 square. The great thing about knights is that when they're not doing anything, you can reuse them thanks to their ability to jump. And look what I do. I am here and here. And not only that, but I also free up the c-pawn for the future. You'll see, it's going to be extremely useful for trying to advance that queenside. That's why my opponent simply plays h3 here. Here I had a dilemma. I spent a lot of time thinking about going back, but in the end, what I did was stay around here. Why? Let's see if I can provoke my opponent into playing g4 and weakening their kingside a little. But my opponent doesn't fall for that trick, so to speak, and plays queen to b3, threatening this square. Alright, another extremely important point in the game. My opponent is targeting this pawn, and now it's my job to think. Is it a good idea to let them capture it? Well, honestly, capturing it isn't the best idea in the world either, so I could play c6. And if they capture, I could start threatening over here and come in with the rook, opening up lines for myself. But then I say, you know what? I don't want to complicate things, so I'm going to play b6. That way, now they can't capture anything, and not only that, but this pawn is also preparing a possible c5, so that it would be defended. So my opponent played a 4 to try to break up this whole structure, and that's the perfect moment to play c5. At this point, I already knew I was in a great position. What does c5 threaten? The answer is obvious. It threatens this, right? Winning a piece. So my opponent has to do something. He captured this pawn from me. And now let's do something. Try to think for yourselves. What's better, to capture with the bishop or with the pawn? The answer, which I'll tell you right now, is to capture with the pawn. Because look, if you capture with the bishop, first of all, you leave yourself with an isolated pawn. What is an isolated pawn? A pawn that doesn't have any fellow pawns on its sides, it's completely alone, and in the endgame, it can be a weakness. Also, if I capture with the pawn, look at these two strong pawns I have here in the center of the board. I'm threatening to win a piece again. And not only that, but now these two pawns support each other. These are called hanging pawns. And look at the way I put on the pressure in the game. My opponent has to move a piece to avoid losing it. So I do the following. Pay attention. This is called playing with initiative, and you're gonna love it. Playing with initiative is always good. Pay attention first. How do I start? C5. Look, Chestnut, you're threatening a piece, but it can be moved. Yes, but when they move it, I did it on purpose so that this bishop would retreat from here. And now I can keep pressing with this initiative. Bishop to g6. Threatening the queen? The queen, it has to move. Do you see what I'm doing? Look at my opponent. Here he is, stuck at home, poor guy, unable to do anything. And I keep up the initiative. Rook to b8. Do you see how important it was to place this rook and not the other one? Now I have the rook on the b8 file, ready to attack this very weak point, which is hard for him to defend. He can't push the pawn forward because he loses the c-pawn to the queen. So what does he have to do? He has to come defend with the queen. And this position is wonderful for me. Don't worry, now I'm going to make a mistake myself. I'm going to show you now. And why am I showing you a game where I make a mistake myself? Well, precisely, so you don't make the same mistake and can win more games. That's obvious, right? If already the... How do you say this? Look, this is very important. If you lose games, people always say, well, when you lose, you'll be able to learn from your defeat. That's true. But if you can learn from mine, it's so much better, right? That way you don't have to lose yourselves. Well, in this case, I improve my pieces, knight to c6. You'll see how important this move is in this game. And my opponent plays bishop to d1. Critical moment. Pause the video if you want and think about what the best move in this position would be. This is an exercise that, if you do it, will really help you train. If not, don't worry, I'll tell you the answer. Look, and we're also going to practice calculation a bit because I'm going to explain it without moving the pieces, okay? The idea is that here I have a really good move, which is the one I played. Bishop to d3. This bishop threatens a rook that can't move, so if he puts his bishop in between, I just capture it. It's free, you see, because I have a bishop and a rook, and he just defends it with his rook. So after bishop to d3, he only has one move to try not to lose that rook, which is rook takes rook. And when I capture, do you see it? Now he has an open space to bring his rook over here. But what's the problem? Then I take rook for rook, and this knight has to go back, and his pieces will be pushed way back. Let me tell you, in the end, to avoid losing this rook, the only thing they can do is trade. Now I trade. All this is forced. That's why I calculated it from the start, because all of this is forced, meaning they have no other option. Now, to avoid losing the rook, the only move is to bring the rook here. And sure enough, I trade the wreck. So now, look at how his pieces are, all the way back here, right? Here I had a really good move, which I was considering for a while, which was bishop to h2 check, sacrificing the bishop, because if they capture me, then I would play queen to e5 check, the king would have to go back, and then I take this one with check, threatening here. They could also block with the pawn, but, well, this looked a bit sketchy to me, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to bring the queen into the attack, set up a battery, which threatens checkmate if my opponent isn't careful. Checkmate on the next move, because the king can't escape, you see? And if now my opponent decides to block, which is the right move, with one of the two knights, so that they threaten checkmate and defend the knight that was over here, which is what they did in the game, then I have to think about how to continue. So what I did was add more fuel to the fire. A piece that wasn't doing anything, you see, a knight that wasn't doing anything, I bring it forward. And now my opponent tries to open up a little space here to get the queen out, and I do the following. I add even more fuel to the fire. Now it's the bishop's turn. I'm threatening a lot of things and looking to exchange pieces and break in. Pay attention to how I do it, because you're going to love it. What does my opponent do? He tries to get in with the queen. Do I care if he gives me this check? Not right now, because I can, for example, play knight takes knight. Check. He has to do something. Knight takes knight is forced, because if he takes with the bishop, I would break in here. You see? So he has to take with the knight, and now I play bishop takes knight. If he comes in with check, I just move away. and nothing happens here. Or I could even block with the bishop. No problem at all. My opponent first captured this bishop of mine. And now, what did I do? Very important. This is a key moment in the game. A key moment in the game. If I hadn't captured this bishop, I would have won the game. This knight would have won the game immediately. And this is a typical mistake, right? One that I make and everyone else makes too. I want to get in through here and I eliminate the defender. But there was a much better move, okay? Much better. The move was queen to c1. Just so you understand, this move would have given me an advantage of -4 or -5. That's huge, like if I had an extra rook for sale. Why? Because this move is so good. Let me explain. It's really simple. I'm threatening the bishop and I'm threatening the pawn. There's no way to defend everything at once. If the queen comes to defend the pawn, I take the bishop. And there's no way to defend both at the same time, so I'm going to take this pawn, then this one, and I'll keep threatening. All right, this move was really good. I miscalculated. First, I calculated capturing, and now queen to c1, check. No worries, I managed to win the game in a way that's going to blow your mind, and you'll be able to use it to win your own games too. But first, I want you to see that it's no big deal. Everyone makes mistakes. Suddenly, now the game is extremely even because my opponent brought the queen over here, defended. If I take this pawn, he takes his, and absolutely nothing happens. That's what happened in the game, but don't worry because I won in 3 moves here. I won in 3 moves, but you have to learn. Sometimes it's really not a big deal if you make mistakes. Obviously, we're not machines. Man, that's exactly what you should do to play to your advantage. I won on the next move. How? Well, with the following move. Pay attention. He's threatening me with the bishop, so I brought my bishop here to provoke my opponent. This isn't the best move. There were probably better ones, even though it's not a bad move. Queen to 8 was probably better. Start threatening. But anyway, let's see why this move, chess teacher, you like it so much. Well, this move is a sucker's trap, as I like to call it. What's going on with this vuse? First, it avoids any kind of check, and second, it lets my opponent make a mistake. If he goes this way, he loses the game. If he goes this way, he loses the game. If he takes the pawn, he loses the game, which is what he did. He took the pawn and lost the game. We're going to win in 2 moves. Try to guess it by pausing the video, because I'm about to tell you. The decisive move was the following. Queen to c8, check, winning the game. My opponent, of course, saw that the bishop can't block because I just gave it away. I can only block with the queen, and now the final blow is, if I capture here, nothing happens. The idea is to distract the king with this check, because whether he takes or goes this way, the queen will no longer be defended, and I'll win the game. My opponent resigned here, of course. For example, let me show you. If he takes here, I simply take the queen. That's how I managed to win the game, even though I made a mistake. It's no big deal. I'm sure these kinds of videos help you a lot because they're completely free lessons that help you improve your chess level. If you want me to give you more gifts like this, okay, subscribe to my newsletter. I'm going to give you gifts, and every Sunday I send you a lesson as well. In fact, today there's a completely free lesson that I'll send to your email. I love sending you valuable content, so just click on the link in the description or search online for Chess Teacher Newsletter, and it'll come up for you, okay? If you want more videos like this, then leave a like. That's how I know you enjoy this kind of content, okay? Or leave me a comment telling me if you also make these kinds of mistakes. And above all, the most important thing is to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. So I hope you loved it, friends, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.